Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pail, steel toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
Welcome in, guys. John Zannis, Bobby Manning, a post-game Garden Report, not a Celtics game, Team USA, for those who watched, and many did, I'm sure. We're going to hop on here. We're going to do a little bit of post-game action. Why? Because it's basketball, and there's 3 Celtics on the team. And right now, Bobby, Twitter is ablaze, not because USA, Celtics Twitter, that is, not because USA defeated Serbia 110-84. In their first game of Olympic action here in group play, but because of what didn't happen, which is Jason Tatum did not play at all in this victory. He was knocked completely out of Steve Kerr's rotation. Asked after the game if there's something the matter with Tatum. Kerr said no. So this is a DNP CD on a national stage, on an international stage for Jason Tatum. A lot of people not happy about it at all. We'll obviously go deep on that, see if we get any comments coming out after the game or any more comments from that or anything from Tatum. But off we go. Want to let you know, Garden Report, as always, brought to you by Game Time. Download that Game Time app if you want to get tickets to anywhere. And there's some really cool stuff in and around town right now, whether it's the Red Sox Yankees. That's going to be a hot ticket right now. You want to get involved there. Red Sox trying to bounce back from a tough one last night. Blew a couple of leads, Bobby, but what are you going to do? Also tons of concerts, and then obviously you want to have this account ready to go in time when football season hits. $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Let's get back to the game, Bobby, and the game. You'd say USA looked rough-ish on their last couple of Olympic tune-ups. They almost lost. Which game did they almost lose?
South Sudan.
Sudan. They almost lost to Sudan. That was a close one. And then squeaked out a win over Germany. Germany, was that the last one? So, you're wondering, okay, well, Serbia, you've got, Jokic, you've got some NBA talent. It's a decent team here. Who they did play in the first round as well. It wasn't as lopsided as this one. This was a totally dominating game, and the U.S. just kind of showed what they have over all of those teams, which is not just superior talent, but also talent where it matters, incredible interior defense that's going to continue to be one of their hallmarks, and also just the shooting. Today's shooting was just lights out, and that's what they can do. They can just bring it, and they did. Especially from, they were ridiculous all day. They shot 62% for the game, 56 from 3. You're not going to get that every game, but it's really hard to argue with the results here in this one.
Yeah, and it was close early before Durant came in, and then it became an onslaught once he started hitting all his shots, and he pretty much hit all his shots coming back from the injury there. So that made a massive difference. That's probably going to be the difference in the tournament. Some teams might have had an outside shot at knocking them off if the U.S. went cold, they turned the ball over a million times, or just looked dysfunctional offensively like they did at times in those exhibition slates, and that's what ultimately almost did them into those 2 games. Durant is the most prolific offensive player on the team by far, at least in this setting. So he comes in, he hits all those threes, he hits the tough fadeaway right before half. They can't match up with that. Serbia certainly can. We'll see if Canada, some of these other teams might be able to. But what you look at from this one, and I know Tatum's going to be the big topic here, is they found a rotation that looks pretty good, that gives them everything they need, that allows them to strike in waves, balanced lineups. Edwards off the bench looks like it's going to work. That Bam Davis center combo, as much as people hate Embiid and the way he fits in with this team, you don't want to mess with the Davis-Bam thing.
There's one other important thing that they found in this game, and I tweeted it right before the game. And I said, I said I would not be surprised if it's either Holiday or White on the floor at all times in this game. And that was basically the case.
And that was a surprise, right? I don't know if we knew whether White would play a ton.
When White, I made that determination personally, and I think, it's not like, oh, genius. But I got that feeling when White closed out the Sudan game and was so important. After he'd had a couple of days around the team and before he got in there, at first he was a DNP-CD, and you were wondering, like, is he there just as insurance? And no, I don't think so. I think if you talk about how important it was to get Holiday on the team, and everyone talks about it, right? Like, how many things have we heard from other players or Grant Hill or other people involved with USA Basketball? Holiday's like one of the first guys we went after. He was super important. They talk about point of attack defense. They want to be able to pressure other teams' guards, up and down the floor. And Hill had an interview yesterday talking about why White over it was on the Dan Patrick, White over Jalen, and he said, well, we got Holiday because we want to do this. He might be the best in the world at it, and the second best in the world might be Derrick White. But when you saw White's impact immediately, and once he worked in there, it made sense to me that, like, they're going to always want one of those guys, particularly when one of your other guards is Curry out there. You're going to want one of those guys out there making sure, and especially when you go those 3-guard lineups, when you have Booker out there who's, kind of a wing, playing the 3 there. You're going to need a Holiday or a White up there to kind of lock things down up top. But beyond that, White does so many other things for you. So I wasn't shocked, but that's another thing they settled into today. I don't think that necessarily impacts Tatum, but it does a little because they are playing a lot of 3-guard lineups out there. And that squeezes Tatum out of the mix a little bit because you've got LeBron and KD at the 4. And if he just is slotting in at the 4 on this team, it's going to be hard to pass those guys, right? The only way he slides in there is instead of Edwards or Booker minutes, but he's not pushing LeBron or KD out of that 4 slot. And when they're going double big as well, I know they did that, they're just, I think Tatum's minutes are going to be a little hurt there. And
that combination's lethal too. They're not going to mess with that. And
they love it, and you've got those 3 bigs. And again, they talked about it as well. Grant Hill talked about it in another interview. Like, they don't want to just rotate, 14 minutes each guy and just play one big. They want to get those guys on the floor as much as possible, because one of the 2 major advantages Team USA has over these teams, obviously athleticism is one, but it's size and it's shooting. Serbia got looks today. They just couldn't knock them down, not with the same clip that these guys can. So you've got shooting everywhere and you've got size. Then you throw the point of attack defense with Holiday and White. It really does look like it was a team that was constructed with a purpose in mind, as opposed to just a super all-star team. And you're going to have that. And some all-star players are going to fall out of the rotation. I was a little surprised Tatum didn't scratch out. If he got marginalized some and got down to 8, 9, 10 minutes, I think we
expected that. Yeah,
I expected, somewhere between 10 and 15. I didn't expect 0. So, I mean, just your thoughts on the decision overall for Tatum to not play when all of those others did.
We talked about it a good amount.
Because this is another possibility. The Bam minutes also. If you don't go double big, the Bam minutes are another, and it could be matchup dependent. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not going to rule out Tatum for the entirety of the Olympic slate here, because there are different matchups. There are different games that might call for him. This is a game where you want to play big, certainly. We'll see what South Sudan looks like on Wednesday, I think it is, because they're not as physically imposing at the center position. But you want all those centers in the mix. You want that versatility at the 5 against a Jokic. I know some people were talking about maybe playing Tatum at the 5 with this group. That wouldn't have worked against Jokic. Maybe that'll work against a different team here. But certainly at the 4 and those double big minutes that we saw, John, will be the opportunity for him, especially given how we saw him play in the exhibitions. He was around the basket a ton. He was cutting. He was posting up. He was trying to play middle in. And you barely saw him at the 3-point line. There were 2 games where he didn't even take a 3. And so the first thing you think of when he sits this game is how much double big they play. That effectively, if you want Booker in there, erases his minutes. Number 2 is the fact that he didn't show a 3-point shot in the exhibition slate. And that's something we've talked about going back to the playoffs. What happened to that shot? Where is it? I was actually a little excited to see him play close to the basket in the exhibition slate. But as I said yesterday, I didn't expect his 3 to disappear and not be a factor in his game at all. I don't know why that happened out there. And he was missing them pretty bad when he did take them. So that ultimately is the biggest reason he ends up sitting in this game. And I got to look back at Halliburton's stats too from those exhibitions. I'd have to imagine he didn't shoot great either. And that, yeah, he shot 28 in the exhibition. So they need shooting, John. If they're going to play big, if they're going to play with a lot of guys trying to drive to the rim, as Edwards and LeBron and all these different guys do, you're trying to phase out the guys who aren't giving you as much shooting. And Booker gave you shooting here. Edwards gives you a little bit of shooting off the bench. Durant certainly is the best shooter you have on this team. And that phased out Tatum. And you got the two guards out there, as you mentioned, trying to glue things together. And if you're going to play bigger, that leaves Tatum out of the mix here. So surprising to see him play zero. Not stunning to see him marginalized on this roster, though, because when you watch the exhibitions, John, even though he was in the game, he was mostly just standing around.
Yeah, and that's the thing is they never quite figured out what he does here, right? Like, what does he do on the team? He didn't have a role. Like LeBron, when he's out there, is playing point forward, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and so it's clear the ball goes to his hands, even when he's playing with Holiday or White. It's not that Holiday's not going to initiate some offense, but everything's running through LeBron. They're not putting Tatum in that position when he's out there, you know, on the floor. They weren't. He was very much standing around, and if he didn't look for his own offense or try to create on his own, he wasn't getting involved much at all. So there were some games where, you barely noticed him. So he didn't play today, DNP. We also expected Noa Dalzell would be a DNP today. She was initially not available, but she couldn't resist the Jason Tatum conversation because she's thinking, no way am I going to let Zannis slander Tatum for an hour straight without coming to his defense in some rational and logical way. I'm not going to let it happen. So I'm jumping in here and I'm going to bring some sanity to this conversation. And we've not gone off the rails yet, but I think it's impossible not to have this be the number one thing we're going to talk about, Noah. So we'll give you a bite at the apple here.
Well, I would argue the number one thing we should talk about is how Jrue Holiday and Derrick White have made themselves.
We did that too. I know they were great. Yeah.
No. I've been listening from the beginning, so I'm all caught up. But yeah, I think it's definitely not what was expected. Right. Yeah. I think just the whole Jason Tatum situation. I was honestly surprised when he confirmed to Gary Washburn that he is feeling fine and that there was no explanation for it, because like you said, Bobby, like a singular minute, to not even check in, not even to get, the backup minutes, like that was, not expected considering his role in the last Olympics and considering what we've seen him do, on the championship team. But I think he's just a little bit duplicative here. Like the things that he does best, LeBron does better. And right now at least. And so
Durant shoots way better. There's so many guys in front of him that do things they need.
That's the main point, is he doesn't fit in ahead of those guys based on what his skill set brings at this moment. And so he's going to lose when if he's just slotting in at the 4, but he could come in at the 3 in place of Booker, or you could see he could take some of Edwards minutes and he could take
Sherrod
some of
was killing minutes. Booker yesterday. He's going to need to do an apology camp for Booker when he comes back.
He was good. He was good. He played the second most minutes on the team too. So they valued his what he was doing. But go ahead, Noah. Yeah.
No, I think part of it is that, Derrick White and Jrue Holiday are playing a position that there aren't really like incredible American guards right now that are in their prime. Like Steph Curry, I thought, if anything, he's someone that's being overplayed because he, to me, has just been defensively a liability a little bit. I'm a huge Steph Curry fan. Everybody probably knows that, they've heard me talk. But I think like he's somebody that's, not in his prime anymore. Like there's a very clear role for Jrue Holiday and Derrick White to be that guard defender and that floor maker and, floor playmaker and just that floor general. And with Tatum, it's like, I think we thought that those guys were not going to be in their prime anymore. And today we saw two players that look like they're absolutely in their prime in Kevin Durant and LeBron James. And so I don't know. It's bizarre. I didn't expect it. I also didn't expect Tyrese Halliburton to be edged out by Derrick White, honestly. I thought that Tyrese Halliburton was going to play that backup point guard minute. So a lot of things, this could shake out in a lot of different ways. And you could probably have benched any two of the 10 guys outside of LeBron and Kevin Durant and probably been fine today, right? So there's a lot of discretion here that Steve Kerr has that's probably going to work out regardless. But yeah, I didn't expect it, honestly. I really didn't. And I think I understand people's hysteria. I also think people should respect the fact that this is not about Jason Tatum or Jrue Holiday or Derrick White or any of these individual players. This is about a team game ultimately.
That's
now,
part
Tatum,
of it, right?
Tatum knows how Jalen feels now, right?
Oh, but oh my goodness. White came in and took his minutes too.
This might be their bonding moment.
Yeah, they're both disrespected now.
Yeah.
That's kind of, you hit it there in terms of like what the story is. Only in the Celtics universe is this a story. Everyone else is watching Team USA go out there and dominate. I
don't know. I think some other people
it's a story,
to see him play zero.
No.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is only here will people be upset and think it's a travesty? Meaning, I think the rest of the NBA world will be like, well, yeah, I could see playing Booker, I could see playing Tatum, I could see playing this. It's a shoulder shrug. Like, oh, I guess that was the decision. Not that they would have freaked out if Tatum played a ton and Booker did not. It would just be like, oh, that's the direction they chose to go. But it's not a travesty the way that it is here. People are legit furious that they think Kerr has a vendetta, that this is personal, that it's BS, that why are the other guys playing? For whatever it is, I mean, this is it's subjective who gets put on the team and then who plays. So they're looking at combos and what works. Would it be stunning if in a game where when you don't have Jokic on the floor and they're not playing a team where they have to worry about the man in the middle, that you don't get as much double big, that Tatum slots in and takes some of Bam's minutes next game. Bam goes down to 8 or 9 minutes and Tatum plays 10, 11, 12, 13. No, it wouldn't be shocking. There's different combos that might work out here where they very well might play matchups. I think they don't play those two guys. Is the one thing we might have learned here is Kerr might decide I'm kind of going with 10 each game based on what I see, unless the game tells me otherwise, and not going to insult somebody with like, what were you going to give Tatum and Halliburton Geno minutes there, at the end of the game, like he's freaking Svi Mihailuk, and like have him come in and clean it up. That would be worse. So I think maybe they just decided that's what I'm going to do. As soon as LeBron came back in on that second rotation, you were like, it's over. Like he's not. I thought they were going to go LeBron, KD, a little Tatum, close it out with maybe LeBron and KD or do a split. So Tatum would get like maybe a third of the available minutes there and the other guys would split out. But I think it was pretty clear early, like he wasn't getting any of it. So it was surprising.
You said it well, John, though. They want to win. They want to play functional basketball here with this team. They don't want to mess around because in the past, or maybe in a World Cup or in a different setting, you might have just thrown the all-stars out there. Maybe Tatum plays over White, even though he's not a point guard necessarily, and it's just Tatum over Bam even, and it's just the biggest names, and you throw them together, and you don't really care how it fits. Maybe this team's good enough to do that anyway, but from the start, from the Jrue decision, they sent the message that they want to play guys in their actual roles. They want to have a real rotation here. They want to have skill sets that fit together. And they want to shoot to be the most dominant U.S. team we've ever seen. And there's a lot of dream team comparisons and all that. They're going to try to do it in a more functional basketball way here. And this didn't come out of thin air. We talked about it yesterday, Noah. Tatum was going to be a weird fit on this team, whether he played or not, just given his role, given the other guys around him. And he didn't play great in the exhibitions. If Tatum played amazing in the exhibitions and was shooting lights out and was giving them a ton, this would have been a lot more shocking and probably more of an insult to Tatum. But when you look at the production from the exhibition slate, Tatum goes 0 for 6 from 3. Halliburton goes 28% from 3. And when shooting's so important on this roster, it makes sense that the two guys who weren't as effective there get marginalized a little bit. And is that going to continue? No, I have a tough time predicting that just because of matchups and all that. But it could. The lineups, the rotations they played in this game were super effective.
Yeah, I mean, they were effective tonight. And if they had lost this game or, the outcome had been different, we'd obviously be talking about why did they not play Tatum? Like, look, the rotations were off or whatnot. The way that I felt when they were struggling, I really didn't like that starting lineup. And when they win, everything kind of goes away. But I still don't love that unit, honestly. But yeah, I think the question for me is it just a shooting struggles kind of thing, or is it just the fact that in the position that he's playing right now, there is a little bit of a logjam? And with maybe if Durant and LeBron James hadn't started 12 of 12 from the field, they would have looked towards another person to provide some relief. But I mean, they look like the best they've ever looked. I mean, they look like two prime, at their prime players. And so to me, it wasn't that surprising once the game got going because it's kind of like who are you going to put him in for? And the guys in general, I think, are Devin Booker and Anthony Edwards that I would view him as being kind of in the same class level right now. And the reality is that Steve Kerr has made it clear he likes that small guard lineup. Not really sure why, honestly, but I think those are the two guys that he'd be taking the minutes at this point. If he does get his 15 minutes a night.
I think you can look at it another way. I do think the whether you decide to play less double big and you move Bam, or as a lot of people are asking, because I don't love the starting lineup either, because is Embiid right now, who looks like the least effective of the three bigs out there. Is the question whether or not you would move to single big and just play what, and not have a second unit that doubles up, split those big minutes between AD, Bam, and Embiid, just have one of them out there, which would allow you to play, KD and Tatum occasionally at the three,
so that's an
along with
interesting
LeBron.
thing.
So you can move that out there if you did that. And I know a lot of people right now think Embiid should be third on the depth chart. I don't know if that's fair or not. But he's clearly looked like the least effective. He looks slow. He's doing some
fouling.
things. He's doing things, lazy fouls, not moving his feet at times, bad turnovers. Like, he just hasn't looked really crisp. So I'm not saying I don't know if it's physical or whatever, but he's not playing at the same kind of speed everybody else is right now. And I mean, granted, he's not that kind of guy. But something looks amiss there. I think if you were to tinker with things, you might consider sliding AD into the starting lineup and then seeing where the chips fall from there in terms of how you rotate. And that could end up with some more Tatum minutes as well.
Well, some of the balance on this team, and I wrote about it yesterday, is they're going to show some leniency toward the legends at the very least. I know Noah mentioned Curry, who's a shoo-in here, mostly because of his status and what he's done over his career and all that. Durant, LeBron, they're producing at the level that earns them those roles, but they would have had those roles regardless of how they were playing. So this is the last hurrah for a lot of those guys that they're going to have those minutes. They're going to have those roles. So the Tatums of the world have to take a sit back. Even Edwards, who I know, me and Noah are always going back and forth about Edwards. He might be deserving of a starting role on this team, but for fit reasons, for the legends who are in the mix here, he's going to have to wait another year too to take the reins on this team alongside Tatum and some of the new age stars. So that's a factor here too. Embiid's the one who you don't understand totally why he's getting the benefit of the doubt he is here. I get against the Jokic, you want that much size at the 5, but you bring up a good point, John. You could just play single big with Bam and Davis and phase out Embiid's minutes a little bit. And does it just come down to Embiid would react a lot more frustrated and handle that worse than Tatum would? Because Tatum's obviously not going to care much here. Embiid, I see that being an issue if you sit him down entirely like you did Tatum here today. And is that the only reason he continues to have that role? Or do you just like playing as big as you continue to here? Because he's not playing well, Noah.
Well,
there's no way to argue Embiid's playing well.
But they won those games, Bobby. The counter to it, because I don't disagree, and I want to hear Noah's thoughts, is that one counter there is that that size is one of the reasons they were so that they gave the teams in the tune-ups so many problems defensively, because it was just there was
double
nothing
big
you
one,
could do with
especially
the double big one. That second unit was just wiping other teams out defensively. People couldn't get any good looks anywhere close to the basket. But yeah.
And Davis
Noah,
a plus
thoughts?
28 in this one.
No, the thing that's weird is that I find this USA stuff so fascinating because there's clearly politics involved, regardless of whether Jaylen Brown is right about the Nike thing that he thinks. But there's clearly, certain players that are harder to bench than others. I think Halliburton's a really easy player to bench.
These four.
Yeah, okay. So that's exactly what I was going to say. I feel like Embiid is not optional, which is really bizarre because he has no track record with his team. He's not a part of the USA, dynasty that they've had. He's not one of those guys. And so, yeah, I'm not sure. I've heard from just when I was in Vegas, I talked to some people. I've heard he was really promised that spot and that it's kind of a tough situation where he kind of needs that.
You had to pull him away from France.
You had to pull a play for us. And you'll be the starting center. And I don't think that's if there's behind the scenes interplay going on, I believe far more that things were promised to people more than,
people were kept off for reasons outside of basketball, beyond like that little inner circle of like, yeah, these guys, you're here and you're going to play. Like if I'm going to bring you out here at this age with your status, or in Embiid's case, pull them away from, another country, it's to play. So they're untouchable.
Yeah. And I think the reality is that like in normal NBA coaching, there's like a clear 5 guys that you want on the court. Maybe there's like one decision you have to make. Like, is it going to be Luke Cornett or Xavier Tillman to play 5 minutes? But it's like, that's not a big part of coaching, right? Steve Kerr hasn't had to be in this position much when he ran the Warriors dynasty. And right now, you could literally make a case for any rotation of 5 players being a good starting lineup here. Like, that's what's so fascinating about it. I don't think anybody would have been able to guess that Devin Booker and Jrue Holiday were going to be the starting guards, starting guards on this team. I never would have guessed that was going to be the lineup. And that's been the consistent lineup. And so in that same vein, like I think there's a world where one of those other guys is the odd guy out. And this is going to become a national story. And this is going to be an indictment on Jason Tatum and his career and his shooting and all that. But in reality, like I do think that there's another world where Devin Booker is the odd guy out, or Derrick White never stepped in the second half versus South Sudan. And Tyrese Halliburton is still running that unit. First half, right. So I think, there's a lot of different things that could happen here. I wouldn't have expected Derrick White to have played that role, but once they gave him that opportunity, it's so clear that they're so much better when he or Jrue Holiday's on the floor. You kind of can't not have one of those guys. So I also think like people should just remember this is just one game. It doesn't necessarily mean that Tatum's going to be out of the rotation for the entire playoff run. I don't know that it was necessarily a matchup thing. If it was, I didn't see it, but I do think that it's one of those things that we're going to overreact to and kind of view it as like an indictment on him. And this is who he is now. And this is the status for the rest of the run. And a lot could change still in the coming weeks.
You probably can't sit those 2 guys out for the whole run here. But again,
you can't, but I do think as Noah pointed out right when she came on and we talked about a little bit, White has value beyond, what Halliburton is going to bring to the team based on what they clearly want to do. Because, and again, Grant Hill said it in that interview yesterday on the Dan Patrick show, or Friday, whenever it was. Holiday is the best in the world at what he does, being able to just harass people on the ball, play up and down, full court, and that point of attack defense. And the second best player in the world might be White. And you saw it clearly. They were almost one or the other. In this one instance, both were on the floor at all times in this game. So what's funny is those 2 guys might be immovable right now in terms of what they want on the floor and how they want this team to play. So I think that I think their minutes are going to kind of stay where they are too, with White getting around 15 and Holiday 21 or 22. So we'll see. We'll keep talking about this right now in a little bit. We have some bills to pay, so we want to let you guys know at home. Of course, we'll start with Prize Picks. Number 1 fantasy daily fantasy app out there. You can use that promo code CLNS. Get up to $100 deposit match when you deposit $100 yourself. And all you have to do is pick more or less on some of your favorite players in whatever sport you choose on any particular stat that's offered, anywhere from 2 to 6 players, and watch the money roll in. Great opportunities here to get involved with some group play with friends, some celebrity matchups, a lot of different ways you can get in on the action. WNBC's NBA season, as we know, is super hot right now. You can get involved there. Obviously, baseball, and soon enough, football will be back in full swing. So once again, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Promo code CLNS, deposit match up to 100. Download that Prize Picks app today. Also want to tell you about Game Time, authorized ticket marketplace. You want to go check out whether it be the Red Sox, your favorite concert series, or as we said, you get into the fall and off and running with Patriots tickets and all sorts of other sporting events with the winter sports seasons beginning in October, November. You're going to want this Game Time app to get in on the action and get these really hard to get tickets. All you have to do is download it, use the code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase, terms to apply. Once again, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Download that Game Time app today. Great features on there. Flash deals, zone deals. Prices go down the closer you get to game time or to the start of your concert. And you have an awesome panoramic view of your seat, so you know exactly what it is you're paying for. And I'm telling you, I have been on the Game Time app a ton because I was trying to get into a couple of things recently, and they are the best prices out there. And especially, as I said,
closer you get to the beginning of the event, you can see those prices start to dip. So check out that Game Time app, CLNS, $20 off. Back to the White and Holiday thing. We talked about Noah. It's very possible Tatum can find a way to slide in different matchups, different rotations. There's other people's minutes who he could take. So not playing today doesn't mean he's not playing at all. But as I alluded to earlier, do you think White's role is solid here, in place of a guy like Halliburton? I don't think Halliburton's sitting the entire tournament, but do you think either White or Holiday's roles on this team are going to change much?
I don't think so, honestly. Just because, the thing that they brought those two guys for is defense. But the thing that I've noticed, honestly, maybe even more than that, is how they've been connected pieces on the floor. And it's so obvious that offensively, some of these guys are just so awkward, like not being a primary scoring option. Like you just see, people kind of forcing passes. There's just a lack of rhythm a lot of times, especially early on in the game. And I feel like when Derrick White's had the ball in his hand and when Jrue Holiday's had the ball in his hand, that dynamic is removed because now you have somebody that's really used to looking for others and kind of shooting as a last resort. And the reality is that both of them are also really good shooters. So I don't know that Halliburton is going to really eat into either of their minutes, maybe a little bit. And maybe one of those guys solidifies themselves in a close game. Like this is really the guy that we're going with. You'd think it's Jrue Holiday because of just his experience with Team USA. And I think there's certain things that he does better. But then also down the stretch with South Sudan, it was Derrick White that played. And I don't know if that was an exhibition game type thing. But I'm more curious, like down the stretch, if there's one of those guys that is kind of the obvious option in games where it does matter. Other than that, I expect to see more of what we saw today from them.
Yeah, something's going to have to stop working for them to continue going in that direction. And next two games, the South Sudan one's interesting because South Sudan pushed them so hard in that exhibition slate, but they shot out of their minds in that game. So it's tough to imagine them repeating that level of competitiveness. They beat Puerto Rico today, so they're a good team. They have a lot of good players. There's not that same level of size at center, or at least physicality at center, that you have to contend with here with Serbia. So maybe that opens up an opportunity to go smaller and try Tatum at the 4 a little bit. That's what's going to have to happen here. He's going to have to cut into Bam's minutes, like John said. And Bam played, 19 today? So maybe you could split those up 10 and 10 if you really want to. But that Bam-Davis combination's been so lethal. Tough to imagine them getting away from that right now. Booker played 26. Could you split up those a little and go big, have Tatum at like the 2?
You could, but you want to set rotations and get into flows, right? I think there's a reason why NBA teams, there's a couple of reasons why NBA teams really only play 8, 9, or 10 guys in a game. 8 because you usually don't have that many good players. That's not an issue with Team USA. But beyond that is you're not letting people get into rhythms when you're playing everybody democratically,
and then you have a weird rotation,
and then your rotations are a mess. So trying to cap it at 10 makes some sense, and there's going to be 2 casualties. We're talking about 12 of the 20 best players in the world right now. Obviously, every one of them deserves to be playing, and I think
some of them aren't even here.
And some aren't here. No matter what decision you make, someone is going to be sitting at the end of that bench like, what? And their fan base is going to be questioning the same thing. I think you're having the same exact conversation. If Booker doesn't play a minute in Indiana, they're probably scratching their heads why White over Halliburton, regardless of how White looked. So that's natural. These are your guys. You're expecting them to play. But it is interesting. Whether or not it changes, we don't know. And we'll have this conversation going forward. But I'll ask this. From Tatum's perspective, how big a hit is this to his because he's riding high in terms of coming off the championship. He's on the cover of, cover boy of SI right now. So there's a lot being made about him, and regardless of the fact that Brown won Eastern Conference Final and NBA Finals MVP, Tatum's still the face of this team that won the championship, and that's how he's being depicted out there. But there's plenty out there who watched him in the finals, watched his shooting struggles, and thought, yeah, they're good. Tatum might not be that guy. And this is further validation for the haters out there who wonder whether Tatum is that guy, meaning that guy. And Tatum has fought against this all year. The disrespect, people don't think we're this, people don't think we're that, people are going to say what they're going to say. This one stings a bit, don't you think? for him, especially having two of your role player teammates play significantly more minutes. There's good basketball reasons for why, but it's still got to hurt.
He didn't look happy on the bench, certainly. And
don't do that, Bobby.
Oh, here it is.
Has he ever looked happy on the bench?
Yeah.
Ever? I've been watching. My biggest shock covering the Celtics was this guy has looked miserable every second that he has spent on the bench since the first game that I was credentialed for. Like, I've been seeing all these clips of him. I feel like I have to come to his defense here because every
you didn't live
single
through
time.
the bike days.
The what?
Yeah, at least he's on the bench as opposed to being by himself on a bike.
Well, there you go. I think that's just him, and that's a bigger conversation around him as a person because I don't think it reflected. Like, he was as engaged today as he always looks. I just have to put that out there because I've been my whole timeline right now is like Tatum, like videos of him like rolling his eyes on the bench. So I have to stop that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he was furious, but he wasn't happy.
Top story on ESPN is just going to be Jason Tatum cutaways on the bench of him not looking happy.
It's probably going to be, honestly. So
yeah.
That I just think for people maybe that don't watch him on the bench all the time, I don't know how much on TV they usually cut to his face, but it was pretty striking how often he looked like that.
You're not wrong, Noah, but as someone just put it here, he's gonna get clowned on Twitter. People are gonna take victory laps and dance on his grave, so to speak, because there is anti-Boston sentiment. There's no question about it. And when you're the champion, people want to knock you down. But Tatum's been taking a lot of shots, and you're walking around like you're talking to the world about maybe I am the face of the league, and you don't get a minute in an Olympic game. That really hurts that kind of aura, I guess is what we're calling his vibe, whoever he is supposed to be, that apparently is really important nowadays. This is a hit.
Yeah, and
I'm not gloating by any means. All I'm saying is, like, if I'm Tatum, I'm kind of like, holy shit, what was that? Like, that's a bummer. You're there for your country and you want to play. And I know everyone's going to say the right things after, but it's definitely got to suck a little bit because inside he does believe, dude, I'm one of the best players in the world. Like, how could you not want me out there? It's weird. Under any circumstances, regardless of who's grandfathered in because of their reputation or what the game flow is or matchup dependent, I can't imagine Jason Tatum would ever figure there's any basketball scenario that would call for him not being good enough to be on the floor in anybody's estimation, regardless of what team or where he is. A guy of that level, yeah.
And there's a positional logjam at that spot, given how high the guys rank in front of him. And Booker's the one. We've debated Booker Tatum for a long time, and that's going to continue here on this roster. And that's the kind of debates we have about these guys. Where are you ranking them? Splitting hairs over different skill sets, over different accomplishments, different situations too. And Tatum right now, coming off this postseason, I feel like we talked about all the same things then that we're talking about now. Yes, he can do a million little things. The width of his impact is so long. Compared to anyone else across the league, he almost has the widest assortment of impact here. But offensively, there's these droughts he goes through, and his three-point shooting drought in particular just lasted the entirety of the playoffs, it felt like. And I'm still confused, Noah, why he wasn't taking them in those exhibition games, because those were opportunities where he probably could have got more up. I'm looking at the last Olympics. He got up almost 7 threes a game. Obviously a different role for him in that spot. But there were games where he was playing a decent amount of minutes during that exhibition slate and didn't take any threes. And so that's the spot he's in right now.
Not just didn't take them, turned them down. Like he would turn down both spot up opportunities and any notion of a little shake and bake step back. He just completely erased that. And you might say, well, there's no time for that on this team. I'm going to give away the selfish stuff. And that could have worked to his detriment, because you look at Anthony Edwards out there and you're like, pass the friggin' ball, dude. Like in the exhibition, he's just looking at it like an Anthony Edwards showcase. I didn't love the way he played, even though he got on more, Sports Center highlights as a result. But I don't know whether Tatum is in his own head regarding the shot, Noah, or he was just trying to be a good soldier here. Because I do think there's many situations. I watched White and Holiday a couple of times. Like, I could shoot this, but there's so many other guys out here too. You're playing on the Celtics. Sometimes a bad shot from Tatum is the best option, considering what else is out there on the floor.
A selfish
Yeah.
forced shot in this situation is never a good option. There's always someone else who can do something else with the ball. So it's easier to not go into that mode. Yet, sometimes others do.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like tonight it didn't matter because Kevin Durant was literally lights out and LeBron James looked like he was 25 and a lot of things were going well for them. But some nights, the fact that Joel Embiid is shooting a corner three with a hand in his face is going to be unacceptable. And like he had a shot today where I was like, you on Team USA, you never need to settle for that shot.
Never.
And
yeah.
And what I liked about how Tatum played during the exhibition, regardless of the shooting struggles, is that he had a few, but he was clearly trying to avoid being that guy that is trying to get in his bag and take a deep contested shot because you don't need to do that on Team USA. And the reality is that it's a little bit of an awkward transition because even Curry, when he had a couple times where he's chucking up a crazy three and then he misses and you're like, they could have gotten something better. But then that's like also who Steph Curry is and that's his game, right? So you either like are one of those guys that's you're so who you are and you're just going to lean into that and take crazy shots or, get in your bag and do the things that you do regardless of who else is on the floor because that's what makes you, like a Steph Curry. Or you're a guy like Jrue Holiday or Derrick White that might play for 20 minutes and not take a shot, but you're so used to being in that role that it's okay. And I think that the other guys like Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards are figuring out like who they are in real time and what their role is on this team. And Tatum leaned more passive and Anthony Edwards leaned more ball dominant during the exhibition. And maybe Steve Kerr liked what Anthony Edwards brought to the table. Another coach might have interpreted it differently. But I think the thing that we should all remember as we're analyzing and discussing this game and this team is that these are not the 12 best players in the U.S. and the 5 players that are on the court are not the 5 best players from the U.S. on the court that are on the court. It's the 5 best that fit together right now in this moment in this game. Like Jalen Brunson is off the heels of he was one of the best players the entire playoff run. He's not even on this roster, right? I would argue that Donovan Mitchell is someone that we haven't even really mentioned, but he's better than a handful of guys on this team, right? Jaylen Brown obviously was the Finals MVP, right? So I think like we shouldn't really use the Olympics to settle debates and to be like, this is the 12 best players and LeBron is the best player in the world because clearly like there were a lot of moments this past year where LeBron was not the best player in the world. There's a reason why he wasn't MVP this year, right? So like I think that's just an element that you have to think about, that this is a slightly different game and it's a slightly different situation. And it's a lot of it is about chemistry and a lot of it is about who fits well together. And I don't know that Tatum really found his space during the exhibition stretch, at least.
And that's surprising. Yeah. Back to John's point, if he is in that top 5 mix, if he is head and shoulders above many of the guys you mentioned there, he probably should have found some kind of role on this roster during that exhibition slate at the very least. And so it's a weird spot we're in with them here, John. And I know what some of the big conversation online is who he was in that 2020, 2021 range compared to who he is now. And it's kind of strange to see people look back and say, oh, he was so dynamic back then and he could shoot the ball so well. And he was people almost talking like he was a better player then.
Well, his pull-up game was better. That's the major difference. Even though this year it rebounded some, but it's his pull-up game was better.
And he was more aggressive than offensively, I feel like. He was more willing to lean on his own shot. He had to back then.
And earlier in his career, when the 3-point percentage was higher, up over 40, he was also not always the automatic number one option on the court. So there were other people there getting attention. Now he's getting so much more attention. So it's harder everywhere he goes. He's seeing a lot of bodies. People are trying to make him make decisions quick. The ball's getting out of his hands, but that pull-up game left him a little bit. And I think that's what's hurt him offensively some here is without that, some of the other stuff suffers also.
Well, it's a good point. It's a good point you make. And Noah said it too. In the Celtics situation, he took on more of a differential role for the benefit of the team, right? So he comes off that run almost playing that way with US here. And there aren't double teams in those exhibition games, right? There's not that kind of pressure on him. And he wasn't always taking that space. Like you said, John, he might have made an extra pass or just kept the ball moving.
And he's not a spot-up shooter either, right? That's just not his role. He's not. And Kerr, that's what Kerr had him doing, kind of standing on the perimeter to keep, to create space. But he's not a catch-and-shoot guy either there. That's just not something that he's been doing a ton. So, it's
whether it's on Kerr to find different ways to include him, or as Noah put out there, it's redundant a little bit. When you have KD and LeBron out there, that he's just suffering in that regard. We do have a comment from Kerr. He said it was a DNP CD. He said Tatum took it well and that he'll make his mark. So it was a decision Kerr made probably prior to the game. These are the guys I'm going with. Somebody said Tatum didn't even warm up. Like, this feels like Tatum was told,
yeah.
I'm not going. I'm not giving you the call tonight. Really, like I'm going to go with these guys, but that's not always going to be the way. But this is my 10 just for tonight, and he had to eat that. That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
Yeah, and I keep going
And I
back.
think also-
Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, I think also like the comparisons with the 2020 team and this team, that was a different team too. Like this team is way more stacked in that standpoint. Like just having LeBron there and the way that he's playing, like it really changes the dynamic. So I think some of it is going to come down to, if Tatum's struggling right now. But I also think that if you had this exact roster in 2020, like maybe he would have found himself in this position more too. And I can't help but think, I don't know what Kawhi Leonard's role would have been on this team, because he feels super duplicative. And I know Jaylen Brown didn't like Grant Hill's comments the other day, but I thought Grant Hill's explanation actually made a whole lot of sense, because another guard actually is what this roster needed more than a Kawhi Leonard type player.
Yeah, if you can't find minutes for Tatum, you're going to find minutes for Brown. Not that, like, what I mean is, like, that wasn't what they were looking for there.
Oh, they would have found minutes for Kawhi.
They would have had to, because Kawhi would have been one of those untouchable sort of guys. I actually think that was a good problem for them to have, him not being available, because it allowed them to construct a roster more in line with what they wanted. And you knew Derrick White was knocking on that door. They liked a lot about Derrick White, but I think when they went down the list, they're like, we literally just can't leave this guy off, this guy off, this guy off, this guy off. And that's just what it became. So I actually think they were probably pleased that they were able to insert White in place of Leonard for that purpose, because, he does do.
And I know there was some gripes from the Clippers over that too, given the continued complaints from every corner about how this thing's playing out. I keep going back to this, Noah, as we have this discussion about Tatum here. And I've asked this question a million times going back to the playoffs. Who is he? Who do we expect him to be night in and night out? Because it just constantly changes who we expect him to be, what his role demands. And here on this team, again, if you think he's a top 5, top 10 kind of guy, he should be playing. And for some reason or another, they just don't see a skill set here that fits in with this group. And right now, it just feels like with impacting different areas is his game.
There's a first team All NBA that included 3 guys
Tatum.
who are international, right?
Yeah.
And Tatum and who's the 5th? Why am I blanking? SGA, Jokic, Doncic.
SGA, Jokic, Doncic, Tatum, and who's the 5th guy in that group?
What's wrong with us?
Luka.
This is easy.
Luka.
No, we said that.
SGA, Jokic.
Doncic.
Oh, Embiid.
No, because he didn't play enough.
It was Giannis.
Oh, and Giannis, 4 international.
God.
Tatum's the only American player to make first team All NBA, and he can't get a minute on Team USA. It's really crazy.
One thing I want to add is, I don't know if you guys watched Canada yesterday, but Jamal Murray comes off the bench in Canada and he like barely contributes anything.
He was terrible.
And RJ Barrett has looked for the last couple of years like an all-star for Canada. And so what do you make of that? Is RJ Barrett a star and is he better than Jamal Murray? Like, I wouldn't make that case. But on this Canada team, he has a level of fit and familiarity that Jamal Murray clearly doesn't have. And also Jamal Murray wasn't on the team last year. But like, there are a lot of examples, if you look at different countries, that certain players just like this environment brings out the best in them. Like, Anthony
but
Davis
Tatum dominated in 2020. So I don't think
but I just pulled up the 2020 roster, Bobby, and the roster included Jeremy Grant, Keldon Johnson, JaVale McGee, Chris Middleton, Draymond Green. Like, it was a very different profile of players and scorers.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why.
This is a different team. Yeah.
And so there's absolutely, this is an embarrassment of riches problem. Like, Tatum, the one thing that I thought was kind of funny was that, like, Steve Kerr could have just put him in just for the sake of like, he's just a USA guy and he's certainly not going to hurt them. But it goes to show you that he's not one of those guys that demands that kind of like, you can't bench me, because Steve Kerr easily could have played him for 5 minutes and at least made this not a DNP conversation, and he clearly didn't. But outside of that, like we all know, I don't think anybody in the world would say that Tatum couldn't have played today. He would have been a liability. They would have been giving something up. It just kind of shows you like how low. Yeah, right. Like it just kind of shows you how low maintenance, I guess, he is in a sense, that this was a thing. And Halliburton as well. I mean, Halliburton looked like he was having the absolute time of his life on the bench today. So he's an easy guy to bench. Well, he's 24 years old. He's happy to be here. But yeah, I mean, I think this is just an embarrassment of riches problem, really. I mean, when I started looking back at this 2020 Olympics team, I was like, it's a whole different ballgame, that roster. Completely different as far as the caliber of players you had.
And Noah, you said it earlier. You've got the untouchables. The guys who probably have it in their contract. I'm starting or I'm playing. It's Durant, LeBron, Steph, Embiid. You're not messing with their minutes. And then you talk about other untouchables based on the team and how they want to play. Amazingly, it appears to be Holiday and possibly even White bringing you to 6. You're going to need a second big at the very least. So you're throwing in Anthony Davis. They're coming in place of Embiid. That's 7 immovable guys who are playing every single day. And then you're toying with that other 5, and you could probably roll any combination out and it wouldn't make a measurable difference in the outcome of the game. That's what I think people are going to ultimately have to come to be able to reconcile as Celtics fans is, while maybe Tatum could and should have played over this guy or that guy, he didn't need to. And that's the reality. That is you could probably have switched it out with any of those other people. Could he have taken Booker's minutes and they win by that? All of them, every single one of Booker's minutes? Probably. I don't think they lose if Tatum plays in place of Booker. But that's the thing, is that little rotation of players there is going to determine. It's the 2 guys who sat, and then Booker, Bam, and as we mentioned, Edwards would be the 3 other guys who you'd think are in competition for those minutes. Now, Edwards, for better for worse, because sometimes he was getting a little bit of me ball, was pretty impressive in the qualifying games, and I think if you look at those, not qualifying, the exhibition games. So if you look at those as a run up of like, let's see what's working and who's playing well and what fits, I think Edwards earned his minutes here. He was a dynamic, singular offensive force who was able to generate his own offense at times when other things were going cold. The games where they weren't shooting the ball well, Edwards bailed them out of some jams by being able to do things because he's more of a slasher and because of his athletic profile. So I think you're almost going to slide him in there as a guy who's not going to cede his minutes either. So Tatum's kind of competing for that final 4, right? Spots.
It says something too.
And Bam looks like he's locked in also. So it's like, it's now we keep shrinking that pool down to Halliburton, Tatum, and Booker. And if only 10 are playing, 2 of those guys sit. And Booker played 26 minutes today and it was pretty good. So I don't know. I don't know what you do here. Like, I can't imagine Tatum doesn't play at all. But also it's like you're having a tough time figuring out where exactly to put him in there. And it's not just because KD and LeBron are who they are and playing at the level that they're playing at.
It's funny because we're almost having the same conversation we had about Brown versus White, as frustrating as that was at the time, and as many other things were floating around that conversation. They're not in the same category, right? Tatum's in that LeBron, Durant, Booker mix there in terms of wing, shooting, offense, scoring. That's sort of the bucket he's put into on this team. And White's in that Holiday, Halliburton, facilitating role. And the fact that those 2 guys, Holiday and White, rose up to that level where they're the 1 and the 2 options at point guard on this Team USA says a lot about their impact and what they've brought to the Celtics here. Because you've said this before, John. Tatum, Brown, they're 2 of the best players in the league. They continue to get better. Without a Holiday and White, they're probably not in the championship conversation. And the fact that those guys came to Boston and solidified those roles so effectively at the highest level, maybe possibly in the NBA, it says a lot about the backcourt that the Celtics have the way this is going right now. And that's not to diminish Tatum and Brown and what they did on their way to the championship, but this says a lot about Holiday and White because they need those guys on this roster, it looks like, the way they're playing them at least.
You know what I compare this to, and this is a strange cross sports.
John, you could play Tatum and if you just wanted to do an all-star team and just run that out there, you could have not had Holiday and White on this team and
easily.
had Tatum and Brown
It's
on this team.
I compare this. This is a weird cross sport comparison, but years back, before in hockey, before Bergeron and Brad Marchand were like household name stars. They were these good players on the Bruins, but they felt kind of more like secondary guys. And they both get on Team Canada, and they get put on the top line with the best player on the planet at the time, Sidney Crosby, and they were the best line on the best team in the world. And Crosby, who's the best player in the world, is like, I freaking love these guys. They're the only guys I want to play with. It's the best line ever. And everyone is like, oh, wow. Like, they're really highly regarded for all of the other things that they do. It's not just about this and this and that. And I feel like White and Holiday, they're kind of getting their due this way. Like, it's going to change the way people look, I think, just judging basketball players and the impact and the value they have on the court. Like, Jrue Holiday is more important to this team than other players with much better resumes. And that's huge. I mean, and again, we do almost underrate it because we get stuck in dumb arguments about Tatum versus Brown and who should have won finals MVP. And it's like, these guys were the heartbeat of the team all year, like White and Holiday and what they did in an unsung hero sort of way. And I love the fact that they're getting... I love White especially. I love the fact that it's showing out on an international stage now for everyone to be like, oh, it's not just role players. Like, these guys are stars in their own right. Stars.
Yeah, and I'll give Noah credit. She thought White was going to play here. I didn't. I thought he was just going to be the guy who was amicable to sitting down.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that this is this USA experience is maybe going to let some of the newer fans, because the more you've been watching basketball for 30 years, you obviously have seen this play out before, but like, this just was never going to be an all-star team, and this was never going to be just all the best players in the world on one roster, because when you have a very star-studded lineup, if you don't have a couple of guys that are used to being fast first and used to defending the other team's best players, you all of a sudden don't have a good basketball team, right? And we've seen that with NBA teams too, that are just like a bunch of big names and don't have the right pieces and things. And I also think a lot of people kind of thought the Celtics were a super team, or I think this is kind of showing us that it was not about being a super team. It's about having like elite role players. And at the end of the day, like, Jrue Holiday and Derrick White are role players. Like, that's the role that they're playing on this team. That's the role that they're playing on the Celtics. But I feel like people just don't respect the value of what a role player is. A role player can be more important than a star player. It just means that you're playing a role of not having the ball in your hand as the primary scoring option. But, and there's only one ball. So it's like, you don't want five guys that want the ball in their hands.
But a guy who just shoots is a role player. Like, that's his role, right?
Yeah. I think a guy who's not a role player...
We tend to value that more. That's the thing, is that when you look at it, you look at Derrick White's role and see that he put up 2 points and be like, he's good, but it's still just 2 points. I mean, was he that good? Yeah, he was monstrous. His drive and kick game, he was hassling and harassing guards all game.
He's so effective.
He's so effective. Yeah. So Noah, that to me, like I said, is we minimize the role because it's not a scoring role necessarily, but it's just as important in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of seeing that with Joel Embiid now. Like he's going to get so disparaged after this Olympic run, and I don't think it's fair because he's also completely playing out of the role that he's used to, and that he's all of a sudden not the primary scoring option. He's not even close to it, honestly. And the reality is that for him to go, he was 0 for 3 from the free throw line today. He was a 90%, 88% free throw shooter this past year, right? He's not even able to find a rhythm right now because he's in such an awkward, like, out of place position that he's not used to being this guy. He's not used to having to be like the gritty, like, just do the little things, because you have actually scores. You don't need to score 50 tonight, right? And so I think, like, part of what was, I'm sure, a consideration when assembling this roster is to minimize the amount of guys that have to have a major adjustment heading into this roster. And by securing Derrick White on this team, that's one less guy you have to worry about. Jaylen Brown would have had to change his game to fit into this team. And I think Jason Tatum was in the process of changing his game and maybe got punished for it, and maybe rightfully so, maybe not. But he was somebody that was trying to figure out, like, he was already kind of not a primary scorer, primary guy in the Celtics the way that he was a few years back. But now even more so, he's deferring when he has guys like LeBron and KD and things.
That's a fair point.
And have we seen Anthony Edwards? I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this because I know I will admit right now I have a bias against Anthony Edwards. It's totally a bias, so I don't want to
Have we seen him pass the ball? No, he had 0 assists today. If you were asking.
Yes. So to me, it's like he's actually not doing anything remarkable because he's doing exactly what he does in Minnesota and exactly what he did in FIBA last year. So it's not hard. It's not hard to be a star. If Tatum, if every single player, if Donovan Mitchell subbed in right now and played like Donovan Mitchell with all that spacing around him, like he'd look great. The question is, can you change your game? And I actually think, I wish Rod was here, because I actually think the Devin Booker is a guy who did look to me like he was changing his game a little bit today and really playing really hard and hustling and diving out of bounds. And he had 4 or 5 threes too, so that helped. But it's like, that's the question here. It's like, can you change your game to fit a completely different situation? And I wish that that's what basketball fans were talking about instead of like the new power ranking came out and Joel Embiid is like the 4th best. He's not even like a top 15 player in the NBA, because we know that he is during the regular season and during the NBA season, which is what we're really talking about when we're making these assertions about people, I think.
Yeah. And the Edwards conversation is interesting because I do feel like they need him sometimes. And I say this all about Brown a lot because
it's
Brown
because of that ability that you need him. It's because
he's so good at what he does. And so
at creating the shot. Yeah.
I don't kill him at the other things he doesn't do. And he looked worse in the exhibitions to me. And I get where you're coming from on that point, Noah, because he did play so erratically at times, 1-on-4, where he would just be stuck in a crowd. But then he comes out at the end of the quarter and hits a 3 at the buzzer that takes you from like 15 to 18. And you're like, there you go. And so he's so aggressive. He's a different player than Tatum. It's interesting. We're going to continue to compare those guys, I'm sure, for years to come. But he, to me, plays more like Jalen in that they'll turn the ball over. They're a little erratic. Sometimes they're going downhill in traffic, and you're like, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden he'll finish through like Jared Allen or Embiid or someone, and you're like, well, go ahead. So I feel like they need that.
And you don't want 2 of those guys.
No. Yeah. So
that's why I actually would be scared to see Jalen Brown and Anthony Edwards share the floor.
Yeah. And
so that's what's killing Tatum right now is Tatum could be in that White Holiday role, but instead he's in that Booker, Edwards, Durant, LeBron, and LeBron's on another level here, but he's in that you need him to go out there and create some points kind of role on this team. And he wasn't able to do that in the exhibition slate. So do you kill him for that? Probably not, just because when he's on Boston, you love the way he's playing in that exhibition slate because there's just so much more around him and he can defer to those guys and it looks better in Boston. So like Noah said, I think he got killed a little bit for trying to adapt to a role that wasn't as comfortable for him right away.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I mean, even on the Celtics, he would get dinged a little bit for, his, passive play at the beginning of games. And he'd said, well, I'm trying to feel things out. And see how things are going.
There's no time to feel things out on this roster.
This roster, right? There's a lot of other people who could come in for your minutes, and it's only a 40-minute game. So if you're out there doing nothing, whether it's actually what you should be doing based on the fact that everyone else is doing all of the other things, but if he's standing around offensively, he's not bringing a ton there. I can see how he kind of got squeezed, a little bit, particularly if he's got a little bit of a nervous trigger finger when it comes to taking that shot right now, which you saw Durant hasn't played. I mean, Durant rolls out of bed in the morning and friggin' shoots 60% from the field, so he's just inhuman in his ability to do that. But you see that Durant just comes out there and it's just boom, 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 boom. That's just what he does. Tatum wasn't doing that confidently in the exhibition and hadn't shot well late in the playoffs there. And, I don't know if that carries over into the perception of what he brings to the team. What he brings to the team right now.
I think he can handle it well, Noah, if he is going to be a more ancillary guy on this roster. And as we talked about yesterday, I don't think any Celtics fan's going to mind him not playing 26 minutes every night during the slate after what he did in the playoffs there in terms of his minute load. So given what Holiday's doing, given what White's doing, and the fact that you're maybe saving Tatum a little bit here if this is going to be his role. I know you want him to play. I know you want him to be a big part of this if you're a Celtics fan. But I think anyone in the chat would agree, and I've heard it too from people commenting on our videos and stuff. Celtics fans don't really care about this. They care more about next year and what these guys are going to look like.
But they do care about disrespect.
They do care about this.
And this
They
is gonna
care about
pile on.
disrespect.
I
Tatum,
mean, look at the chat. People are panicking. Like,
the least
People
patriotic people in America right now are Celtics fans. Okay,
Yeah.
the thing is, they don't give a fuck about USA winning today. They're just mad that Tatum didn't. Kerr didn't play Tatum. So F USA. Where's my guy? So yeah, people. There's a big disrespect thing going on right now. So yeah, they do care, Bobby. I just
I'll do a Twitter poll after this.
I mean, he can he get away? I know he got the championship, but like perception wise, it's just they don't like how he's standing on the cover of SI. They don't like how he screamed after he lifted the trophy. It's just one thing after another, and now this. And I know he was in that video, right, with the SI thing, being like, "Yeah, I see all the jokes online, whatever." But can he get a little respect? I think he needs some this summer.
Yeah.
It's so crazy that he won the first championship and all anyone's doing is just making fun of him.
I said he's going to be the first person ever to finally win that title and have his legacy impacted in a negative manner.
Durant.
Durant.
Durant. But
I
for
have to say,
for different reasons. Tatum's game was, well, all he does is get stats. Let's see him win. And then he won. And they're like, well, he's actually probably not good enough. Anyway, Durant was that he took the easy way out. It's different, but you're right. Durant will never shake that. Tatum's not going to have it. I've said this since the end of last year. Tatum's going to have to do something individually to shake that off, regardless of winning, because people have decided this was a garbage championship. And much like the Durant thing, Noah, and I'm glad you drew that comparison, it doesn't matter whether it's just. It just matters if that's what people think. You can't make people unthink it. If the world believes that the Celtics had an easy path and Tatum played like ass and was carried by his super team, that's what they're going to believe until he shows them otherwise. There's no erasing that unless you go out and do it different. So Durant needed to go win a title elsewhere outside of Golden State, which he didn't do. So he'll forever have taken the easy way out. It doesn't matter that he was their best player and won NBA Finals MVP. That's the narrative. This is going to be the narrative on Tatum. He's got to kind of, what stinks is you want him to be less of an individual player because he's better and the team is better that way. But now he's got to show something, which is so odd for a person who finished top 6 in MVP voting, all first team all NBA and won a title, that he's got to prove himself again. But he kind of sort of does in a weird way.
Yeah, what I was going to say, so I've been following the NBA my whole life, but this is my first year consuming so much like Twitter and chats and people's opinions. And one of the things that stood out to me so much is just how much groupthink there is in establishing like opinions about players and about championships and about what's legit and what's aura. And I just know that I don't resonate a lot of times with what like 99% of the basketball world has decided is fact. Like, for example, again, I'm not saying this, but like Devin Booker's pretty hated, right? Everybody hates Devin Booker. Everybody thinks that he's like kind of a bad defender. Even though I actually think he's a much better defender than he gets credit for.
He's not a bad defender. Yeah.
He's not a bad defender, but everybody's like Anthony Edwards, like he has so much aura. Look how funny he is when he says that he's the primary option. That's the way he's perceived globally right now. And I would say those two guys are pretty comparable in what they, from a basketball lens, and what they bring to the table, but the energy around them is completely different. And Tatum's right now victim of the fact that his personality is like dull, honestly. And I don't know what his actual personality is like, but the personality that he portrays in the media, whatever, like he's that's become the storyline. And that'll be the storyline probably for a long time unless he decides to change the way he's perceived externally. But I just think it's dumb, honestly. And I think it's dumb that basketball discourse centers around like people's vibes so much, and around like if a one-liner is like a zinger at a post-game presser, like the stuff that Anthony Edwards says, if another player said it, they would be getting criticized so much, but because he says it, people have kind of bought into this feeling around him as a person. And I think the entire Celtics championship run is getting discredited because like Tatum's personality is like this as well. Like I think there's a lot of elements to it that are just super, just everybody kind of starts to copy one another when they form these things. And I don't think it comes from an authentic place at a certain point. Maybe people don't even realize it.
But
you remember me and Jimmy's advice, Sean.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it. Don't worry about what everyone.
Yeah, Jimmy, I hate it. Well, Noah, let me ask you this: do you believe that Tatum's ascension to a default top 5 NBA player was also a little bit of NBA groupthink?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all of a sudden, he's unmistakably one of the 5 best players, and now he's judged by that standard, which actually hurts overall because it's easier to knock somebody down from way up here than it is from the Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker range of player, where like he kind of lived before. And in the last 3 years, everyone's just automatically Tatum's a top 5 guy. He's an all NBA first team lock every single year. I think he has to fight to prove that on a regular basis, a little bit, because I think people just kind of handed it to him. And now there's a little bit more scrutiny because he's, like I said, he struggled at least with his shooting on a big stage. And you throw in that the body language and the kind of this and that. Yeah, it's a lot of it centers around perception. But you're right, there is a little bit of NBA groupthink that kind of establishes who a guy is and what he's supposed to be, and then that's just kind of what you have to battle. Real quick, we want to continue on because it's a good conversation. There's quite a few people who are super engaged in the chat. Tell you briefly, a couple more sponsors here on the Garden Report. Rocket Money. Bobby, have you gotten down with this?
Yes, sir. It's great.
This thing saved me so much money 1 year. The first year they came on as a sponsor.
Yeah,
so much money.
I think you mentioned it back then, John. They'll find those reduced deals if you're going to cancel something, and that company might offer you. I know a lot of newspapers do that. If you say you're going to quit, and they'll give you like the 10% of the cost of what the subscription is to stay, you can do that through Rocket Money, which is pretty cool.
So Rocket Money goes in, it finds all of those subscriptions that you might have forgotten about, double paid. Those yearly ones get you every single time because you don't even know they're coming. You think you canceled or you forgot about it. And it puts them all out there for you and kind of says, hey, do you want to keep this? Do you want to cancel it? And most Americans think you're spending like $50-$60 a month. It's way, way higher than that, like closer to 300. This is an average American spending 300 on subscriptions. And you're right. A lot of times you might be thinking, I'm paying $6 a month for this thing. And then you look and it was 30, Bobby, $30 a month I was paying for something. I thought I was paying like $7.99. So it consolidates those, saves you money by, letting you either cancel or renegotiate. So you want to get in there, stop wasting money on things you don't use, cancel those unwanted subscriptions. Go to rocketmoney.com/garden. Once again, rocketmoney.com/garden. Also, while we're here, I will tell you about Bobby's favorite sponsor, HelloFresh.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby, what did you get this time?
I got the fish box, and they're always changing stuff up. I got some yeah, but it's different stuff every time. So I finally made fish tacos. I've never done that before. One of my favorite things to get out, John's fish tacos. I always thought, I don't have the ingredients. I don't have the right stuff to make it. I don't really know how to make all those sauces they use. But they made it so easy here. They had the packages. You just mix together in a couple different bowls, the sauces you need. They had all the cabbage chopped up already. And it was ready in 20 minutes. It was so easy to make it. I thought I'd never make fish tacos.
There you, Bobby, that I honestly couldn't have said it better. But as you guys know, America's #1 meal kit, and that's for a reason. Makes life super easy, but delivers restaurant quality ingredients right to your home. You open the box, you read the menu card. 15, 20 minutes later, you have a restaurant quality meal. Avoiding the trips to the grocery store is huge. And the prep time it takes to measure everything out, the amount of food waste that goes into it when you don't use everything and you just need a little bit of something for one recipe. And I'm victim to that a lot, Bobby. You should see how many Thai chilies I have in my fridge right now because it's like ridiculous, and cilantro and all of those things that you just use a little, and the rest, if you don't get a chance to use it, it goes. But great opportunity here to get involved here. Go to HelloFresh.com/ what is it? Garden apps?
Garden apps. You get free appetizers for life.
Garden apps. That's what it is. Free appetizers for life. That deal is back. So once again, free apps for life when you go to and use this deal right now. When you go to HelloFresh.com/garden apps, check it out. One free appetizer per box while the subscription is active. So get involved there. Guys, final thoughts here. And again, this conversation continues until we see what role Jason Tatum plays in that next game. Let's say, hypothetically, it stays like this. He is marginalized. He's an odd man out in most of these games. How bad is that for him?
Well, I think the biggest
both in terms of how's he going to react to it? What's that do for his overall perception? We talk about Jaylen Brown. One of the big differences between Jaylen Brown being disrespected and Jason Tatum being disrespected is Jaylen Brown legitimately uses it for motivation, comes back here, and he's had chips on his shoulder since he was announced as a Celtics draft pick and booed off the Garden Report floor, or the announcement was booed at the Garden, not the Garden Report, at the TD Garden floor, all the way till now to this Olympic thing. It's all, he's pissed off all the time because he's not getting his due, and he uses that and it fuels him to be better. If Tatum comes off of this and he is kind of this guy the whole way through, how's he going to respond?
I think it's all about how he handles it, and he's done a good job handling criticism, handling struggles. I feel like staying involved in games. I'm sure he'll stay involved in this situation until that opportunity comes, if it does. So I think that's the key. You just worry a little bit, Noah, about the criticism piling up and the way people want him to play piling up, and maybe that starts to influence him a little bit. But he just seems comfortable, in my mind, with how he plays, his role in Boston. Obviously, the team's giving him the full support, and I think Joe Mazzulla does a good job helping him handle this kind of stuff because, listen, this stuff's floated around him for a while. This kind of slights and criticisms and just people's overall dissatisfaction with his game and how he approaches things, but he continues to go about it his own way. And sometimes that's frustrated me. I haven't always been the biggest fan after some really bad losses in the past of him saying, yeah, I'm going to do things the same way. We're not really changing anything. I'm just going to flush it and not even think about it. And that goes back to what you said about his personality, and how sometimes that can be a little unsatisfying, but it has helped him and the Celtics, I feel like, bounce back from some really bad losses. And they didn't have as many this year. But even in 2022, they go down 3-2 to Milwaukee. You think they're done. They're not playing well. And he comes back and has the game of his life. He's pretty good at shaking these things. And that's one thing you got to give him credit for. So as long as he doesn't allow criticism of the way he plays and approaches the game to change it, because as much as people want him to go back to chucking shots and looking for his own offense and stuff, I don't think that's going to help the Celtics at the end of the day. So it didn't look great here, Noah. It might have left him out of this rotation, but I think you want him to continue to play like that and focus on the little things when he's back in Boston.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy at this point in his career that's going to change his play because of criticism or because of like narratives or things. Like I think people.
Well, what about for the lack of awards, right? Because that is something he complained about in SI. I feel like we've been snubbed a little bit. He hasn't, right? But MVP, I'm sure he feels a little snubbed in.
He wants, and he definitely wants all of these things. I think people have always gotten it wrong, Noah, that's his motivating, that's what motivates him, the individual accolades. But he wants them because he wants to be considered the greatest, and that's kind of what's in his mind. So that's what I do wonder, is whether that hurts his perception of himself a little bit in terms of like, well, shit, am I not? Or does he get mad? Does it fuel him? Or does it just roll off him and he just comes back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't feel great. Like, it definitely doesn't feel great, right, to be in this position where you, like, nobody wants to sit on the bench. Nobody wants to not play, right? Everybody wants to be out there, regardless of who you are. So I'm sure it doesn't feel great, but whether it has, like, an actual impact on his play next year, I can't really see what it would be. He doesn't seem to me like, historically, there's a big track record of him doing things in that way. I don't expect that whatever happens in this saga. And I also think that this whole dialogue is around one game, but there very well might be the next game he plays 18 minutes, right? Like, we don't know what's going to happen next. And so I think that's just putting that out there, that we might have a completely different discourse at the end of this Olympic run, depending on how things go here. But in either way, I don't really see him or Jalen doing things all that differently because of USA basketball. Like, what they did, won them a championship ultimately, right? So, like, I'm sure they're both going to work hard. I'm sure they'll both have whatever it is that gets them going. And I think for each of them, it's something slightly different. But I don't see a world where he comes into next season because of like what happens in the 6-game stretch with a different mindset. Like, once he's back in the environment in Boston with Joe Mazzulla and everybody, I don't think that stuff's going to play a big role.
Yeah, it's weird though, right? If you're returning home, again, you're right. There's nothing definitive we can say off this, which is Bobby, before you got on here and we were off the air, he was just talking about how we were going to react. And I was like, it's hard to react big to it happening, kind of like, oh my God, Tatum's out, because he could very well play 20 minutes a game the rest of the way and everything is different. You really don't know, or something might not work, right? Today everything looked great because the shots fell at a ridiculous clip. But if they don't, do you start to say, well, we need a little bit more whatever, and you start to change your rotations a little bit and play people differently. So the story's not fully written. It just is going to be a little odd coming back to Boston with Jalen, the non-Olympian, Tatum, the benched Olympian, and Holiday and White. Like, we were awesome, like we did so good on this team. And like, Jason, how was your Olympic experience? Like, it was all right. The food was good.
Maybe it'll help Jalen. It'll help Jalen emotionally.
They'll commiserate. This
Yeah,
will be the irony is this will be the thing that finally brings them together.
Yeah.
Being
That would be great.
Being snubbed by the Olympic decision makers. One not making the team.
I do actually think, and Joe's used that to some degree too, that the outside perception of the team and the way they manage the media reaction and all that, I think that did actually galvanize the group a little bit this year. I think that's actually something that collectively got all of them going, Tatum and Brown in particular. So it might be good. It might be motivation going into next year. Would Brad say at Summer League, Noah, that Brad said he's going to handle it the same whether he is snubbed or made the team. But I think, some other people look at it and say Brown being snubbed there is good motivation for him going into next season. And it's something that he can use to actually get better. And listen, they still have to make strides, right? Because it's probably going to be harder this year. Porzingis is out. Who knows if they'll get the same production for some of the role guys. They need to take steps, especially into the future. The roster's not going to be dominant forever around them. So there does have to be motivation for both these guys to continue to improve as players. They're both young. They both still have room for growth. And if snubs, slights, criticism in the media from fans is going to be what galvanizes them here, it might be for the better for the Celtics and for those two.
When do you think Tatum last had a DNP CD? Ever?
I was looking at that. I couldn't find any.
Ever?
Probably none.
Probably never. Maybe I'll have
Yeah,
more
it's pretty
empathy
amazing
for like
to
the
think
Xavier
about.
Tillmans of the world. At one point, he was doing the little squat on the bench that Tillman does, and I was like, maybe this is good to just give him other.
He was doing the little stretches behind the timeout huddle.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tatum, who coined the Stay Ready crew, is now part of the Stay Ready crew, which is crazy.
Steve Kerr should have told him to stay ready.
It's a total, Tatum's out there. He's staying ready. What if Derrick? What if White and Holiday, when they're interviewed about the guys who didn't play, and be like, "Hey, those guys do a great job staying ready." How do you think Tatum would take that? They do a great job staying ready. Yeah, go ahead.
I know I put a Twitter poll up. It has 400 votes right now. 82% of Celtics fans are bothered that Tatum got a DNP, and 19% are okay with it because Team USA won.
Yeah.
So people aren't happy.
Yeah,
no,
they would have rather
happy.
Tatum play 27 minutes, shoot 1 for 10, with 0 for 8 from 3, and Team USA lose. Yeah, would you have been happier if Tatum played and USA lost? Yeah,
he could have played and they would have won, but they're trying to play the ultimate team basketball cohesive style possible and win in a dominant fashion. And they actually achieved that here today. They had a tough time separating themselves from the teams in the exhibition field. So there might have been a sense, especially going into this, how things went last time, especially in the World Cup last year, that they're vulnerable, right? The field's really good. They've gotten good challenges from multiple teams here. So if you just roll the ball out there and turn it over too much or don't play a cohesive style, you might be putting yourselves at risk of losing to one of these teams. And they're trying to do everything possible to prevent that. And could you have put Tatum out there over White in this game and won? I think so. But it probably would have been a little bit scarier given what White did and how cohesively they played out there. So I don't know, going into Wednesday, you could definitely win, Noah, against South Sudan by just rolling out your best players and having Tatum involved over some of the guys who have fit better so far. But they're probably going to stick with what they're doing here, I'd have to imagine. Maybe Tatum doesn't get 0 because that's just going to continue to be a thing. But he's still going to be behind some of the guys.
Results. That's the problem. Is like if they squeaked out a victory, and this was the rotation that Kerr went with, and like the players in question, Edwards or Booker were terrible. Like you'd be like, well, what are we doing here? But like they won by 26 points. It worked.
And everybody played well.
And it's a tough one. It's a tough one to argue for. And again, flipping it back to the thing we talked about whether Tatum deserves to play these minutes over these guys, I think you have some interchangeable parts, and I think he will. But I do believe, and I said it before the game, and I'll stick with it now. And Noah said it when Derrick White was on the team. White has a role. We know that Holiday has a role, and I think those guys will stay there throughout. So, yeah, again, take solace, Celtics fans. You had two players to root for on the court today, both of whom did you proud. And Tatum, I assume at some point or another will get his. But Holiday, we spent time talking about White because he was a surprise. Not a surprise, but not everybody knew what his role would be. I was happy to see what it was. Holiday, honestly, they let him open all game. He could have scored 30 today. Like, he was almost
unreal.
He was almost like, I guess I'll shoot because you guys are daring me to shoot. But like,
why are you daring him to shoot also? I shoot 42% from three, right? Like, what are we doing here? Like, he could have scored. He got into the lane a bunch and he was like, I guess I'll pass because I've already shot a bunch and I'm not supposed to shoot 15 shots a game. If he wanted to, he could have put up 25 plus points today. And that's not even where he made his greatest contributions. But yeah, I don't understand that, Noah. That was weird to me. Why they're just sagging off yeah.
him.
And that's not the first time. This has been kind of a theme throughout the Olympic run. I guess they have to give something up, but I wouldn't give
maybe
up
because Durant and LeBron and Embiid are in the front court.
I know.
I know, but still, it's just, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right when you put it like that.
This was silly, though. In the exhibition slate, John, he shot 60% from the field, 43% from three. Only LeBron had more assists, and he had more rebounds than Tatum in the same amount of minutes. So he was incredible in that slate, too. He was the first guy they picked for this team back in the fall, and it looks like that was a pretty good decision because he's another guy, if you were just picking an all-star team, you easily could have left off this roster, and instead they've prioritized him. He's unreal. You've always loved him, John. The experience was every bit as much as
I've been trying to get him here for 5 years. So yeah, I mean,
he's perfect. He really is.
Fan. He's almost a perfect player for what he does.
And it's so crazy that White's like a pretty similar player to him, and you have both. It's embarrassment of riches at that position.
That's why I love the Hill thing. He was like, Holiday's the best in the world, and he's like, and White might be the second best at doing what they do. It's incredible to have both of those guys, playing for the Celtics. So again, world gets to see that. That's the positive to be taken out of this here, is these guys who you watch, who sacrifice their stats to play on a team as good as the Celtics were last year. You see on an international stage their value and how much everybody values their contributions here. Tatum, different story. We'll see what happens with that Wednesday game. What time is that game, guys?
Let us see. It is 3:00 Eastern. So pretty good time.
Oh. Okay, I think we're going to try to hop back on there and do something for whoever's around. Bobby and I for sure, Noah, and if, Sherrod or anyone else there, we'll give them a crack. But we'll definitely jump back on here because it's fun to talk about. And now we have, Boston relevant storylines here. This isn't nearly as interesting to talk about if Tatum played 14 minutes, scored 4 points or whatever. It would just be like, okay. So
it is crazy to the difference between 0 and if he played 5 or something.
It's crazy. 0 something. Noah, any closing thoughts before we wrap it?
No, I think this is all fun. We get to watch high-level basketball, and we get to watch the best players in the world compete, and we got to watch like Embiid and Jokic go at each other today. Like it's pretty cool that we get to see that in late July after getting good basketball through June, right? So I think if anything, Celtics fans should feel lucky that the break between games was like a week and then summer league and then a week, and now we got this.
We didn't talk about Jokic, but boy,
what are you gonna do?
I mean, he's going to
get played better today. He played better today than he did in that exhibition site. They were all over him in the exhibition
He's
game.
Still not shooting the 3 well, but you're right. They were all over him in the exhibition game, and they're throwing bodies at him. He's still Jokic, but it's there's not much you can do. For many of these teams.
I don't know. Did you catch the Greece game, John? He doesn't have a ton around him either.
The Greece game. Don't disrespect the Greeks. They'll be back. We'll be back.
I hope they go far because I love watching him.
He doesn't have a lot around him there in terms of
Who's the biggest threat to him, you think, Noah?
The biggest threat to US?
It's Canada.
Probably Canada, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
kinda
they just
smoked Canada in exhibition, though. I'm interested in France. See what Wembanyama can do.
If they shoot the ball well
Yeah.
because of the guys they have down low, then yeah, France is good too.
Yeah, and they played Brazil, so you didn't get to see them tested there. But so far, France looking good. Canada, I think, rolled through. Who did they play?
Canada
They
played
played
Greece,
someone
and then
good. Yeah,
Canada played Greece, and then Germany looked pretty good. Was it Spain?
Yes, yeah, they kind of
Yeah.
rolled Spain. Spain's not as good as they usually are, but Germany's really
No.
good too, and they won the World Cup. So Tice went 7
Yeah.
for 7, John. One of my favorites.
Tice was ridiculous.
He's a different guy in this competition.
He's unbelievable. Tice making his Olympic imprint. Jason Tatum, not so much.
Yeah.
Just what we expected, right? Unbelievable. Schroeder, Tice, big Olympic.
Schroeder had 12 assists.
Yes, he did. I'll still fight that one until the death.
If Noah was covering the Celtics, then she would have hated Schroeder. There would have been a lot of Schroeder hit pieces.
I don't do hit pieces.
Talk about groupthink in terms of the perception of Schroeder. Jimmy and I were just pushing back that the blame that Schroeder was getting for the overall deficiencies of that particular team were off the charts crazy. Like so much he wasn't ideal. He wasn't an ideal fit on this team, but he's a good basketball player, and they got him for nothing. I don't know what people were expecting for a veteran minimum. He was a good basketball player, but not a great fit on that team. But man, the Schroeder hate that year was off the charts. It was off the charts.
Yeah.
He got his redemption in FIBA last year.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
He got his I don't know what you get for winning the World Cup. I guess the World Cup.
Yeah. Respect. That something that Tatum and Brown are still searching for right now. So again, Jason Tatum doesn't play. Good games from Holiday. Derrick White makes a contribution. USA looks solid, shoots the lights out. A 110-84 win over Serbia in their first game. South Sudan coming up on Wednesday. We will continue with Garden reports following Olympic Games and anytime there is breaking news. Also, you definitely want to keep your eyes peeled. Follow Noa Dalzell on Twitter. If you don't already, follow Celtics CLNS, her podcast, You Got Boston, debuting this week on the CLNS Media Network as Noa kind of begins the new chapter of her official relationship with CLNS Media. You'll be seeing a lot more of Noa out there, and she's got that pod, which is starting up this week. Do you know when day one is, Noa?
I think we're going to have something tomorrow.
Huh? Tomorrow. I love it. I love it. Guys, check it out. Look for notifications. Subscribe. You can find that podcast on Noah's YouTube channel or over at Celtics CLNS or, of course, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, what have you. It's called You Got Boston, Boston Celtics-centric NBA podcast featuring Noah 3 times a week. Is that right? 2 or 3? 2 times off season, 3 times in, or we never know?
That's right. Yeah, 3 times a week. And I just put the link in.
Perfect.
Yeah, it'll be 3 times a week, weekly guests, and then a weekly live, or we'll just do questions.
Awesome. So that's what we have. So you want to check out Noah and Bobby will have more, and we'll have more Garden reports coming up throughout the week. And as always, as we said, if there's
and then Jimmy and I are heading to France.
I love that.
You'll see us on the ground there. We might do a Garden report.
Yeah, you will. Don't go wherever Gary Washburn was last time because his Wi-Fi was terrible. But yes, we might get some international Garden reports. We're going to have 3 members of the Garden report team in Europe at the same time. Right? Do I overlap a little bit when I head to Greece?
A little bit.
Yeah. We do an all international one. That'll be great.
Yeah, you'll have some crazy backdrop there in Greece.
Yeah. Well, it's not like I'm staying at the Acropolis. It's just going to be an apartment. But yeah, when I get to I'm not getting to the islands until you guys are back. But anyway, so follow, safe. Hey, thanks guys. Follow all of us on Twitter for notifications when we do have our programming coming up. But again, lots of great Celtics content. Also our Patriots coverage over on Patriots Press Pass. Those guys are out there today
Patriots training camp. Tomorrow, first day with pads. That should be fun, where you can really start to see some actual football being played. So that's on Monday. Tons of good coverage from Taylor Kyles and the gang, Mike Cadlick, over on Patriots CLNS, as well as Greg Bedard, Andrew Callahan, and all the other contributors over there. So subscribe, like us, share it, tell your friends. In the meantime, we will see you guys at, when is it? Where's our outro? We'll see you guys on Wednesday after the game around 5 o'clock, USA versus South Sudan. Take care.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an option. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.